Ben Gadd is a recognized authority on the natural history of the Rocky Mountains. He's a freelance interpretive guide and lecturer in Jasper National Park. He directs the non-profit Jasper Institute. He also serves on the board of Friends of Jasper National Park. Ben Gadd wrote the award-winning best-selling Handbook of the Canadian Rockies. His other nonfiction books were also inspired by the mountains. His first novel, Raven's End, reflects his knowledge of these intelligent birds and their mountain terrain. Ben Gadd on the peaks and down to earth.
Let's see. There and there. And across to I love the name of that plant. Now this is rock. Good old Devonian Rocky Mountain limestone. Almost on top. Whoa, we can thank the glaciers for this place. Wonderful glacial sculpture of the summit. Oh, I love this place. Well, welcome to my world here in the Canadian Rockies. Oh, what a place. These are female bighorn sheep. For a guy who likes rocks, the Canadian Rockies have to be it. I'm a geologist, so rocks are pretty important in my life. Started out by climbing rocks, got interested in them, just interested in what kind of rock I was climbing on, and then took a degree in geology. From there, branched out into natural history, and I've just been fascinated with everything in the Canadian Rockies. But geology is always kind of special for me. When you climb a mountain, you might as well look around on the top. And for a geologist, the tops of these Front Range peaks are very interesting. Now here they are here. These things. Have a look at this. These things are stromatolites. 367 million years ago, about 2/3 of the species of life on Earth got wiped out. Something went wrong with the oceans all over the world. The water got kind of poisonous. Not enough oxygen seems to be the problem. And many, many, many things died. One of the things that didn't die, though, was this kind of stuff down here. These things, these stromatolites, which are very primitive and simple, were able to survive this cataclysm, whatever it was. And meanwhile, most of the things that ate them disappeared. So they got really big and did really well for a while, until eventually all the predators re-evolved, and then you don't see these kinds of things in the rock after that. This is a boulder of quartzite that was carried in here on the back of a glacier a long time ago. It could have been maybe as long ago as 128,000 years, from an outcrop of quartzite far to the west, many, many kilometers to the west. There is no quartzite that occurs naturally here in the bedrock. This had to be carried in. Nice little orange lichen growing on it too. Can you see that? This fossil snail lived about 370 million years ago, crawling around on an ancient seabed back in the Devonian period. That was when the whole Rocky Mountain area was part of the western continental shelf of North America. And all these layers of limestone laid down little bit by bit on the seabed. Well, that was fine, but we had to have mountains, right? Some people get the idea that mountains were pushed up looking just the way they are now, but that's not true. All those big thick layers were pushed up very, very slowly. And as they rose out of the sea, then the rain fell on them and the rivers ran, and when they got really, really high, the glaciers began to carve them away until we got the beautiful mountain shapes we have now, like this one, Roche Miette over here in the distance. Those rivers have been running throughout the Rockies, carving for perhaps hundreds of millions of years, and they still run today. Walking along the Moline here, a lot of buffalo berries, some wild currants. Oh, and paintbrush. That's amazing. Here it is September, and this thing is still in full bloom. Castelleja miniata, the red paintbrush. A lot of people don't realize that the flowers are the little green things sticking out. The red parts are only colored leaves called bracts. They attract hummingbirds, and a hummingbird puts its little bill down inside that spiky green thing and gets the nectar that's way down at the bottom. This time of year, the elk stags are getting into the rut, which is to say the mating period. The testosterone is really flowing, and one thing they like to do is thrash the bushes. Biologists call this horning, which is kind of amusing because elk don't have horns, they have antlers. Whenever I go to Moline Lake, I always think of Mary Schaefer. She was really interesting. I've got a picture of her here in my pack. She was a Philadelphia Quaker widow whose husband had died, and she started coming to the mountains with him originally, but wound up coming on her own after he died. Here's a picture of Mary. She's the second one from the left there at one of their backcountry camps. That ugly looking cuss there in the Boy Scout hat is Billy Warren, her chief guide. In 1908, Mary Schaefer came to this lake with Billy and another of her guides, Sidney Unwin, following a map actually drawn for her by one of the native people of the area, a fellow named Samson Beaver. Said, Mary, you've got to go and see this lake. You know, you're here exploring the mountains. Go see this lake. I'll draw you a map. And she did. She followed the map along with Sidney Unwin and Billy Warren as guides and a few others in the party. Well, Mary was one of the great people of her time. Somebody who came to the mountains to explore and enjoy and learn. She wasn't like the sort of people who came to the American Rockies, back where I grew up in southern Colorado, in that dry desert country. In that place, the mountains were a place you went and you had mines, and you had mills, and you had farms and ranches, and you kind of exploited things. And where I grew up down in southern Colorado, that was still going on. I can remember being a kid in math class back when I was 11 or 12 years old in Colorado, looking out the window on a hot early September day in school and just hating it, you know, and looking at the mountains over there shimmering and thinking, I'm going to go there and I'm going to be free when I get there. Well, that's what Mary Schaefer did. She went to the mountains and was free of Philadelphia society. She would ride away from the train station at Lake Louise on her horse, and rumor has it that as soon as the party got well into the woods, she would go away a bit and come back wearing a pair of pants instead of a skirt, and she would ride stride on her horse like a man, you know, and tongues would wag about this in Philadelphia. Well, I too got free. I think of the American Rockies and a lot of things, and came north and found these wonderful mountains protected in national parks that belong to all of us as places where we can go to learn, enjoy, appreciate, and not to mess up. Mountains that are worth saving just the way they are because they're so wonderful. And it changed my life just as it changed Mary Schaefer's life. This 800 million year old slate lies right along the backbone of the Canadian Rockies, the boundary between Alberta and British Columbia, and also the continental divide, the great drainage divide between the Atlantic and Arctic Oceans on this side and the Pacific Ocean down here. Water flows out the west end of this cute little portal lake here into Yellowhead Creek, on down the Fraser River to the Pacific Ocean. But you know, I think, as a geologist, that there's probably some water sneaking out the other end of the lake, going underground through the rocks and boulders over a low point in the divide into the Miette River. The Miette River water flows into the Athabasca River, the great northern river that takes that water all the way to the Arctic Ocean. This is the Athabasca River, and I am keeping my balance on it pretty well today. Don't want to fall in there, don't want to turn the boat over. This water is really cold.
Down to Earth continues with writer Ben Gadd in the Canadian Rockies.
I'm scrambling down by the Fraser River here, and there it is. That's Mount Robson over there. A lot of clouds around it like there usually are. We're probably seeing maybe half or 2/3 of that mountain. It's so big, it's just about always lost in the clouds. Summit elevation is 3,954 meters above sea level. It's twice as high as the Grand Canyon is deep. That's not only the highest peak in the Canadian Rockies, it's the tallest mountain from top to bottom, just overall relief anywhere in the Rocky Mountains. And so it attracts climbers. I've had some fine adventures on Mount Robson. I've been on it 5 times and made the top twice. First time was way back in 1974 when I was a young man. And Mount Robson is a young man's mountain, I'll tell you. It takes a lot of effort to get up there. It just beats you down. All those endless ledges, and then you hit the ice and the snow, and then you're on the top, and it's going to be another 12 hours or so to get back down, even to the halfway point where you camped. It's a difficult mountain, a long mountain, a dangerous mountain. There's no easy way up, no safe way up Mount Robson. And when I said it's a young man's mountain, it's true. I was lucky enough to be able to climb it 14 years after 1974. And this time I was with a young man. I was with my second son, Toby, when he was 18 years old. We stood on the top of Mount Robson together. It was kind of nice, you know. I'm not a young man anymore, but Toby still is. And maybe he'll get up Mount Robson twice in his lifetime too. I hope so. This river flows from those glaciers on Mount Robson. Mount Robson is so big that it generates its own weather. Lots and lots of rain falls here, and it produces this wonderful cedar forest. Rare thing in the Rockies. Ernest Thompson Seton was a great Canadian naturalist, wildlife illustrator, author of children's books. When he was a young man sketching wildlife in Manitoba, he learned something amazing. And that is that if he just stood or sat in one place for quite a while without talking, without moving around much, he would see and hear and feel things that you would never notice when you're talking with all your friends walking through the woods. So let's pretend we're here with one of Ben's groups, and I'm going to set my stopwatch to 5 minutes, and we're just going to watch and look around and see and hear what we can see and hear. Everybody ready? Okay, here we go. Devil's Club. Western red cedar trees. Frog skin lichen on the trees. Feather mosses on the forest floor. Oak ferns. Dwarf raspberry. Foam flower. The sound of water everywhere. Young Douglas firs. The oak ferns moving in the currents of the water. Bracket fungus. Wild currant. Well, there it goes. No more nature appreciation allowed. This is my favorite place for messing around in boats. The Cranberry Marsh, near Velmount, British Columbia, over on the west side of the Canadian Rockies, in that great big geological valley known as the Rocky Mountain Trench. The water is very shallow. I can look right down to the bottom and see all those little groves of chara, a special form of algae. So green and growing right now. Imagine the seasonal ecology of this place, what it would be like in winter. The ice very thick. Lots of life under the ice, all the little fish down there. Cold and white on the surface. It amazes me to think that 45 million years ago there was no valley here at all. The mountain ranges in behind me, the Canadian Rockies, the mountain ranges out ahead of me were all part of one big mountain area. And then the earth kind of fell in, produced this great long valley called the Rocky Mountain Trench. One wetland after another. Geology underlying everything is really underlying everything. There go the geese down there. They probably don't think much about geology, but it gave them a place to live. The young ones, you know, the ones just born this year, they're just learning how to fly, how to get into the V. Wingtip to wingtip, save all that energy heading south. And a big flock is a strong flock. When they land on the feeding places on their way south, they want as many birds as possible so they can bull their way in, you know, when the other flocks are on the pond. So they're trying to gather as many young birds as they can. I can imagine them talking, "Hey, get in our flock. We're a really cool flock." Now maybe that's true anthropomorphic, but maybe not. Because one thing I've learned is that animals, in some ways, are a lot more like us than we think they are. Maybe those geese are saying a lot more than just all the time. Well, there's some water smartweed right there. It just occurs to me that some of the water that I'm paddling in right now is being evaporated upward into those clouds, and those clouds are going to go over to the mountains where it may rain or snow, and that water is going to run down those mountains, carving them a little bit, you know, one tiny minuscule bit. It's going to get carved, probably by every cloud if you could just measure it. And that's going to contribute to the beauty of this landscape that I'm enjoying while I'm paddling on this marsh. The system works. This may look like an ordinary stream, but it sure starts at a place that's anything but ordinary. This is the north face of Mount Edith Cavell. It's like going back to the Ice Age. It's when you look around in a place like this and you see all the ice, you see glaciers, you see icebergs like this one I'm leaning on right here, and you see the enormous amount of rock that has been removed by ice during the Little Ice Age. Started in 1200 AD, and by the mid-1840s this was just covered with ice. 150 meters thickness of ice covering the spot we're standing right now. It's all melted away now except for that stuff in behind. That's still a glacier over there. That's glacial ice. Just imagine that growing and growing and growing and then creeping down the valley and pushing all the rock ahead of it, building up these enormous moraines on either side of us. That's what happened here. It's happened many times. That's what carved the landscape of the Canadian Rockies. It's a landscape that everybody thinks of as being mountains pushed up, and definitely rock got pushed up here a long way. But what you see is the carved out landscape, carved out from those masses of pushed out rock. This is glacial sculpture. This is grand stuff. 5 minutes ago, this was a pretty pleasant place. Now it's snowing and blowing. It's just classic Canadian Rockies, and it always reminds me of a kind of rule that some of the more beautiful places in the world are some of the more difficult places in the world. There's just something about that combination that works here. I love it. The human species is about a 250,000 years old. During most of that time, we've walked around in little family groups, hunting animals, gathering plants out in the wilderness. Maybe 10,000 years ago or so, we began a big population explosion, and it's wound up with us living in big cities, the whole works, you know. But that doesn't mean we can't get away. We can't get out there in the wilderness and kind of get the feeling of those days when we were the hunters and gatherers. When you stop to think of it, going to the wilderness is really going home.